The weight of the silver tray dug into my palm as I balanced 5 champagne flutes, weaving between designer gowns and tailored suits. The chandeliers of Bellissimo cast everyone in a golden glow, making even the waitstaff look expensive for a moment. Not that it mattered. To these people, I was just another shadow moving between their conversations, invisible until they needed something. "More champagne, sir?" I asked, my voice trained to that perfect pitch of servitude. Present, but unobtrusive. The man didn't even look up, just waved his hand dismissively as his companion plucked a glass from my tray. 8 hours into a double shift, my feet screamed in the mandatory black heels. A blister had formed on my right heel, and I could feel it bleeding into my shoe. The pain was a constant reminder of how much I needed this job. Since Marco left, taking what little money we had and leaving me with a mountain of debt and a 3-year-old daughter to support, every shift meant survival. Sophia's face flashed in my mind, her dark curls and innocent smile. The babysitter charged extra after midnight, and I still had 2 hours to go, another expense I couldn't afford. But what choice did I have? The restaurant was buzzing with Chicago's elite celebrating something I wasn't important enough to know about. I'd been assigned the back section, tables 15 through 20, the least desirable area, tucked away from the main floor. My manager, Vincent, had made it clear I was lucky to be working this event at all. "You're here because Gina's sick," he'd said, eyes lingering a moment too long on my chest. "Don't mess this up, Aria." I was clearing table 19 when I felt it. The shift in the atmosphere. A subtle change, like the air pressure dropping before a storm. The security guards at the entrance stood straighter. The maitre d' rushed forward with an obsequiousness I hadn't seen all night. Even Vincent, who had been harassing one of the newer waitresses by the bar, suddenly snapped to attention. They arrived like a silent wave, 3 men in suits that cost more than my yearly rent, moving with a coordinated precision that spoke of practice and purpose. But it was the man in the center who seemed to bend the very light around him. He didn't look around the room. His eyes stayed fixed ahead as if he already knew everything and everyone in his vicinity without needing to check. Dark hair with silver temples, a jawline that could cut glass, and a posture that spoke of absolute authority. He moved like a predator, not hurried, but with the calm assurance that nothing could touch him. I'd worked at Bellissimo long enough to recognize the unofficial royalty of Chicago when I saw it. Dante Ricci. The name whispered through the staff like a prayer or a warning. I'd heard the rumors. Everyone had. How the Ricci family controlled half the city. How businesses that refused their protection mysteriously burned down. How people who crossed them disappeared. But I'd also heard about their code, their twisted sense of honor. You could survive in their world if you were smart enough to play by their rules. I kept my head down as they were escorted to table 20, my section. Of course it would be my section. Tonight of all nights, when my feet were bleeding, when I was exhausted, when I couldn't afford a single mistake. Vincent appeared at my side, his cologne suffocating. "Table 20 is yours," he whispered, fingers digging into my arm. "Don't screw this up. Mr. Ricci is a valued patron." I nodded, trying to ignore how his touch lingered. Vincent had been getting bolder with his advances since my divorce, as if my vulnerability was an invitation. Taking a deep breath, I smoothed down my black uniform and approached the table. The conversation halted as I drew near, 3 pairs of eyes evaluating me with clinical detachment, but the 4th, Dante Ricci's, didn't even flicker in my direction. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to Bellissimo. May I start you with something to drink?" My voice remained steady, a small victory. One of the men ordered a bottle of Macallan 25, while another requested sparkling water. Mr. Ricci said nothing, his attention on a leather-bound portfolio open before him. Up close, I could see the perfect cut of his suit, the glint of a platinum watch that probably cost more than everything I owned. He smelled of expensive cologne with notes of sandalwood and something darker beneath, a scent that was distinctly masculine and undeniably dangerous. "And for you, sir?" I finally asked, forcing myself to address him directly. That's when he looked up. His eyes were the color of whiskey held to the light, amber with flecks of gold, framed by dark lashes. But it wasn't their color that made my breath catch. It was their absolute stillness. No warmth, no coldness, just pure, calculating intelligence. "Espresso," he said, his voice lower than I expected, with the faintest trace of an Italian accent. "No sugar." I nodded and turned to leave when I felt his gaze follow me, not in the way men usually looked at women in short black dresses, but as if he were memorizing every detail of my existence. The night progressed in a blur of champagne refills and entree deliveries. I managed to avoid any major catastrophes, though my hands trembled slightly whenever I approached table 20. Mr. Ricci barely acknowledged me, engaged in hushed conversations with his associates that stopped whenever I approached. It was during the dessert service that everything changed. I was serving table 18 when I overheard a fragment of conversation from the adjacent table, table 17, where 3 men sat hunched over their cognacs. They hadn't ordered much, but they'd been watching the room with unusual interest. "Definitely her. Marco described her perfectly," one of them muttered. My blood froze at the mention of my ex-husband's name. I nearly dropped the dessert I was placing in front of an elderly woman. "You sure? Ricci is here. We can't afford mistakes," another whispered. The boss was clear. "She knows where Marco hid it. We take her tonight. Make her talk." The dessert fork clattered against the china as my hand spasmed. I mumbled an apology to my customer and backed away, mind racing. Marco. What had he done now? And what did these men think I knew? I retreated to the service station, pressing my back against the wall, fighting for breath. Marco had always been involved with dangerous people, but he'd promised me he was clean when we married. A lie, like everything else he'd told me. When he disappeared 3 months ago, I'd assumed he'd run off with his latest mistress. Now it seemed he'd stolen something valuable enough that people were willing to kidnap me to find it. And my daughter was home with a babysitter I barely knew. Panic clawed at my throat. I couldn't run. They'd follow me home to Sofia. I couldn't call the police. Not with whatever criminal activity Marco had dragged me into. If these men took me, my daughter would be alone, abandoned. My gaze fell on table 20, where Dante Ricci sat, power emanating from him like heat from a flame. The most dangerous man in the room was my only hope. With shaking hands, I grabbed a notepad and scribbled, "Next table. He took me. Stay calm." I didn't know if he'd help me, but I knew men like him valued territory, and Bellissimo was undoubtedly his. An abduction in his presence would be an insult, if nothing else. I composed myself and approached table 20 with a coffee pot. As I refilled Mr. Ricci's espresso, I slipped the note beneath his saucer, my fingers brushing against the fine bone china. His hand shot out, capturing my wrist in a grip that was firm, but not painful. Those amber eyes locked onto mine for the first time that night, and I felt stripped bare, as if he could see every secret, every fear, every desperate thought running through my mind. "Is the coffee not to your liking, sir?" I managed to say, acutely aware of his skin against mine, of the controlled strength in his fingers. He released me slowly, deliberately, his gaze never leaving my face. "It's perfect," he said, the words carrying a weight I couldn't decipher. I nodded and backed away, heart hammering against my ribs. Had he seen the note? Would he even care? 10 minutes later, as I served table 17 their check, I got my answer. "Miss," one of the men said, a smile that didn't reach his eyes stretching across his face, "we seem to have a situation with our bill. Could you help us outside for a moment?" I felt the blood drain from my face. This was it. They were going to take me. I need to get my manager for billing issues," I stammered, looking desperately toward the service station. The man's smile tightened as he stood, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. "That won't be necessary. This will only take a minute." Before I could scream, another voice cut through the tension, smooth, commanding, with that slight Italian lilt. "Is there a problem here?" Dante Ricci stood beside us, hands casually in his pockets, but his posture suggested anything but casualness. Behind him, his 2 associates flanked out slightly, creating a formation that suddenly seemed less like businessmen and more like soldiers. The grip on my arm loosened as the man from table 17 paled visibly. Mr. Ricci, he said, swallowing hard. No problem, sir. Just a misunderstanding with our bill. Dante's eyes, those terrifying, beautiful eyes, flickered to me, then back to the man. A misunderstanding, he repeated, the words hanging in the air like a blade. Yes, sir, the man said, backing away slightly. Dante nodded to one of his associates, who stepped forward. Perhaps we can help clarify the situation. Outside. The men from Table 17 exchanged glances, trapped between fear and their original purpose. Whatever they saw in Dante's expression made their decision for them. They nodded stiffly and allowed themselves to be escorted toward the exit by Dante's men. Dante himself remained, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. What's your name? He asked, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Aria, I whispered. Aria Costello. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition, perhaps. But of what? Finish your shift, Aria Costello, he said, straightening his already perfect cuffs. My driver will be waiting for you at the service entrance. Do not leave with anyone else. It wasn't a request. Before I could respond, he was walking away, following the path his men had taken with my would-be kidnappers. I stood frozen, the check still clutched in my trembling hands. I'd just exchanged one dangerous situation for another, yet somehow, the devil I didn't know seemed safer than the one I did. The rest of my shift passed in a daze. Vincent questioned me about what had happened, but I deflected, claiming it was just a misunderstanding about an order. He didn't believe me. I could tell by the suspicious gleam in his eyes, but Mr. Ricci's interest in the situation kept him from pressing further. At 2 a.m., I changed out of my uniform, hands still shaking as I pulled on my worn jeans and sweater. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Mrs. Petrova, my elderly neighbor who was watching Sophia. I called her back immediately. Aria? Her accented voice came through. Is everything okay? You're usually home by now. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Petrova. The shift ran late. Is Sophia all right? Sleeping like an angel. Don't worry about rushing home. These old bones don't need much sleep anyway. I thanked her, guilt and gratitude warring in my chest. I needed to get home to my daughter. But if those men were waiting for me, the service door loomed before me, heavy and metal, leading to the dark alley behind the restaurant. On the other side waited either my salvation or a deeper danger. But what choice did I have? Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. A sleek black Bentley idled in the alley, its headlights cutting through the misty Chicago night. A mountain of a man in a suit stood beside it, opening the rear door as soon as he saw me. Miss Costello, he said with a nod. Mr. Ricci is waiting. I hesitated at the threshold, one foot in the restaurant, one in the alley. Behind me lay the life I knew, struggling, exhausted, but mine. Before me, a door to something unknown. My daughter, I said, finding my voice. I need to get home to my daughter. The driver's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Mr. Ricci has arranged for Mrs. Petrova to stay the night. Your daughter is safe. The fact that he knew about Mrs. Petrova, about Sophia, should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Dante Ricci had already infiltrated my life. There was no running from this. I stepped into the alley, letting the heavy door swing shut behind me with a final metallic thud. The Bentley's interior was all soft leather and the subtle scent of luxury, a world I recognized from serving its inhabitants but had never experienced. The driver closed the door behind me with a soft click that sounded oddly final. To my surprise, the back seat was empty. No Dante Ricci waiting to interrogate me. Where is Mr. Ricci? I asked, as the driver slid behind the wheel. He'll meet you at the destination, the man replied, his eyes meeting mine briefly in the rearview mirror. My name is Antonio. I work for Mr. Ricci. Where are we going? My voice sounded small in the cavernous back seat. Somewhere safe. Antonio's tone suggested that was all the information I'd be getting. The car glided through Chicago's late-night streets, its powerful engine barely a whisper. I watched the familiar neighborhoods give way to the glittering downtown, then transition to the affluent Gold Coast area. My anxiety grew with each mile that separated me from Sophia, despite Antonio's assurance that she was safe. We eventually turned into a private drive guarded by an ornate iron gate that opened silently at our approach. The Bentley continued up a winding path lined with perfectly manicured trees until a mansion came into view, a modern fortress of glass and stone perched on the lakeshore. "Is this his home?" I whispered, more to myself than to Antonio. "One of them," he replied as we stopped before an imposing entrance. A woman in a sleek black pantsuit waited at the door. She looked to be in her 50s, with silver-streaked black hair pulled back into a tight bun and sharp eyes that assessed me the moment I stepped from the car. "Miss Costello," she said with a clipped Italian accent, "I am Rosa. Please follow me." Too numb to do anything else, I followed her through massive doors into an entrance hall that could have housed my entire apartment. Minimalist but undeniably expensive. All clean lines, marble, and subtle lighting that highlighted what I assumed were original artworks. "Mr. Ricci will join you shortly," Rosa said, leading me into a study lined with bookshelves. "Would you like something to drink?" "Water, please," I managed, my throat dry with unspoken questions. When she left, I sank into a leather chair that probably cost more than my car. The reality of my situation was finally hitting me. I had willingly gotten into a car with strangers, leaving my daughter with a neighbor to meet a man who was, by all accounts, one of Chicago's most dangerous criminals. But what choice did I have? Those men at the restaurant would have taken me. And who would have cared for Sophia then? Rosa returned with a crystal glass of water on a silver tray. "Mr. Ricci has been delayed. He asked that you make yourself comfortable." She gestured to a door at the side of the study. "There's a guest suite through there if you wish to refresh yourself. I've laid out some clean clothes." Before I could respond, she was gone, leaving me alone in the oppressive luxury of a Mafia boss's study. Curiosity, or perhaps just the need for distraction, drove me to examine the bookshelves. They contained an eclectic mix: classic Italian literature, modern business texts, historical accounts of Chicago, and, surprisingly, several volumes of poetry. Many of the books showed signs of actual use: creased spines, the occasional dog-eared page. I was running my fingers along the leather-bound spine of Dante's Inferno, an irony not lost on me, when I heard the door open behind me. "An appropriate choice," came that voice, low, accented, commanding. I turned to find Dante Ricci watching me from the doorway. He'd removed his suit jacket and tie, leaving him in a crisp white shirt with the top buttons undone, revealing a hint of tanned skin and the glint of what might have been a gold chain. He looked somehow more dangerous in this slightly relaxed state, like a predator at rest but still alert. I stammered, pulling my hand away from the book as if burned. "Please," he said, gesturing to the chair I'd vacated. "Sit." I obeyed, perching on the edge of the seat while he moved to a small bar cabinet and poured himself a measure of amber liquid. Whiskey, probably. "You slipped me a note," he said without preamble, turning to face me, glass in hand. "Why?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. "Those men were going to kidnap me," I said, fingers twisting in my lap. "They mentioned my ex-husband's name, said I knew where he hid something. And do you?" His eyes were unreadable, watching me over the rim of his glass as he took a sip. "No. I haven't even seen Marco in 3 months. He left me with nothing but debt and a daughter to raise alone." Something flashed in Dante's eyes at the mention of my daughter. "You have a child," he said. It wasn't a question. "Sophia," I confirmed, my voice softening with her name. "She's 3. She's with my neighbor." Anxiety clawed at me again. "I need to check on her." "Your daughter is safe," Dante said, setting down his glass and pulling a phone from his pocket. After tapping the screen a few times, he held it out to me. On the screen was a security camera feed showing Mrs. Petrova knitting in a rocking chair next to my daughter's bed. Sophia was sleeping peacefully, her dark curls spread across the pillow, one small hand clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, my eyes filled with tears at the sight. "You have cameras in my apartment. Installed tonight, for her protection." He took the phone back, his fingers brushing mine in a contact that sent an inexplicable shiver down my spine. "And yours." I don't understand, I said, wiping away a tear that had escaped. Why would you help me? Why would you care what happens to me or my daughter? Dante studied me for a long moment, his expression inscrutable. Then, he moved to sit in the chair opposite mine, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, a surprisingly informal posture for such a powerful man. Your ex-husband, he began, his voice taking on a harder edge. Marco Costello. He worked for an organization that has been encroaching on my territory. The Vaziri family, I whispered, the name slipping out before I could stop it. Dante's eyebrow arched slightly, the only indication of his surprise. You know more than you let on. I shook my head quickly. Only the name. Marco tried to keep his work separate from our home life, but I overheard phone calls, caught snippets of conversations. When we first met, he said he worked in imports. I was young and naive enough to believe him. And now I know better. I met his gaze steadily, finding courage in the thought of Sophia. Whatever Marco was involved in, whatever he took, I know nothing about it. I just want to keep my daughter safe. Dante leaned back, assessing me with those amber eyes that seemed to cut through pretense. 3 months ago, Marco Costello disappeared with something valuable that belonged to Reza Vaziri. Since then, both Vaziri's men and mine have been looking for him. My mind raced. 3 months ago, exactly when Marco had walked out on us. I thought he left me for another woman, I said hollowly. Perhaps he did, Dante replied. But he also left with $5 million worth of uncut diamonds. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Diamonds? I echoed weakly. Vaziri believes you know where Marco hid them. Dante's voice was matter of fact, as if discussing the weather rather than millions in stolen gems. My sources tell me Vaziri gave his men orders to bring you in tonight for questioning. Their methods would not have been gentle. A cold dread settled in my stomach. And your methods? I asked, unable to keep the tremor from my voice. For the first time that night, something like amusement flickered across Dante's face, a slight softening around the eyes, the barest upward tilt of his lips. I have no intention of harming you, Arya Costello, he said, my name rolling off his tongue with an accent that made it sound like something precious. I believe you when you say you don't know where the diamonds are. Relief washed through me, followed immediately by suspicion. Then why am I here? Dante rose and walked to the window, looking out over what I presumed was Lake Michigan, though the darkness revealed only scattered lights on the water. Vaziri won't stop looking for you, he said without turning. As long as he believes you have information, you and your daughter are in danger. What does that have to do with you? I asked, confusion overriding my fear. Why would you care what happens to me? He turned then, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Chicago is my city. What happens here happens under my protection, or my permission. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Vaziri overstepped, using civilians, a mother with a child. That crosses a line. There was something he wasn't telling me. I could feel it in the slight tension in his shoulders, see it in the careful neutrality of his expression. So what happens now? I asked. Now, he said, you stay here, where I can ensure your safety until this situation is resolved. Stay here? For how long? I have a job, a life. My voice rose with panic. A life that will be cut very short if you leave this house, he interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. Vaziri's men will be watching your apartment, your workplace, your daughter's daycare. They will find you, and they will take you. But Sophia, we'll join you here tomorrow, he finished. Rosa has already prepared a room for her. We'll bring her things as well. I stood, anger cutting through my fear. You can't just decide this for me. You can't uproot our lives without... Without what, Arya? He asked, suddenly much closer than he'd been a moment ago. Without your permission? I'm offering you protection. I'm offering your daughter safety. The alternative is Vaziri's men finding you, torturing you for information you don't have, and leaving your daughter an orphan. His words hit me like a physical blow. I sank back into the chair, the fight draining out of me. How long? Until we find Marco or the diamonds, he said, his voice softening slightly, or until we ensure Vaziri no longer poses a threat. And in return? What do you want from me? Dante watched me for a long moment, his gaze so intense I had to fight the urge to look away. Your cooperation, he said finally, and your trust. Trust is earned, I replied, surprising myself with my boldness. The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been a smile. Indeed it is. He glanced at his watch. It's late. You should rest. Rosa will show you to your room. As if summoned by her name, the door opened and Rosa appeared. This way, Miss Costello, she said with a nod. I stood on shaky legs, exhaustion suddenly crashing over me. At the doorway I paused and looked back. Thank you, I said softly, for helping us tonight. Dante inclined his head slightly, that almost smile playing at his lips again. Sleep well, Arya, he said, my name in his mouth still sounding like something rare and valuable. As I followed Rosa through the silent mansion, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a deal with the devil, a devil with amber eyes and an Italian accent who had, at least for tonight, kept the monsters at bay. Sleep came surprisingly easily in the plush guest room, my body surrendering to exhaustion despite the chaos of my thoughts. I woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Lake Michigan, the water a brilliant blue that seemed to mock the darkness of my situation. A soft knock at the door startled me. Rosa entered carrying a tray with coffee and what smelled like freshly baked pastries. Good morning, Miss Costello, she said, setting the tray on a small table by the window. I've brought breakfast. There are clothes in the closet that should fit you. Mr. Ricci has arranged for your daughter to be brought here at noon. Sophia, I said, suddenly fully awake. Is she all right? Does she know what's happening? Rosa's stern expression softened slightly. Your neighbor was told you had a family emergency and needed her to watch your daughter overnight. A car will bring them both here. Mrs. Petrova will return home afterward. I nodded, relieved that at least Sophia hadn't been frightened. Thank you, Rosa. She inclined her head slightly. Mr. Ricci would like to see you in his study when you're ready. With that, she left, closing the door softly behind her. I sipped the coffee, rich and perfectly prepared, while trying to process my new reality. In less than 24 hours, my life had been completely upended. I was now essentially a prisoner in a Mafia boss's mansion, hiding from men who wanted to torture me for information I didn't have. Yet even as fear gnawed at me, I couldn't deny the thread of relief running beneath it. For the first time in months, I didn't have to worry about making rent, or stretching groceries to the end of the week, or whether I could afford Sophia's asthma medication. We were safe. For now. The closet contained an array of women's clothing in exactly my size. Everything from casual wear to elegant dresses, all with designer labels I recognized from serving wealthy clients at Bellissimo. I chose the simplest outfit I could find: jeans, a soft cashmere sweater, and ballet flats. After showering in a bathroom larger than my entire kitchen at home, I made my way downstairs, guided by the memory of last night's journey through the mansion. I found the study easily enough, but hesitated at the closed door, suddenly aware of my heart pounding against my ribs. Before I could knock, a deep voice called out, "Come in, Arya." I pushed the door open to find Dante seated behind a massive desk, his attention focused on a laptop screen. Sunlight streamed through the windows behind him, casting his sharp profile in stark relief. He'd dressed more casually today, dark trousers, and a gray cashmere sweater that looked deceptively simple, but probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Good morning," I said, hovering awkwardly in the doorway. He looked up, those amber eyes assessing me briefly before he gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I expected," I admitted, taking the seat. "Good." He closed the laptop and leaned back, studying me with an intensity that made me want to squirm. "We have matters to discuss before your daughter arrives. Is she still coming at noon?" I asked, glancing at an elegant wall clock that showed it was just after 10. "Yes. Antonio will bring her and your neighbor here." He steepled his fingers, his expression turning serious. "Vaziri's men were at your apartment building this morning." My blood ran cold. "Did they?" "They didn't get inside," he assured me. "My people intercepted them, but it confirms what I told you last night. You cannot return home. Not yet." I swallowed hard, nodding. What about my job? I can't just disappear. It's been handled. Your manager received a call informing him of a family emergency requiring your immediate leave of absence. Vincent will just hire someone else, I said, thinking of the stack of applications he kept in his desk, a constant reminder of how replaceable we all were. Something dark flashed in Dante's eyes. Your position will be waiting when you return. I didn't ask how he could guarantee that. Some questions were better left unanswered. Now, he continued, about Marco. I stiffened at my ex-husband's name. I've told you everything I know. I haven't heard from him since he left. I believe you, Dante said, surprising me. But I need to understand what he might have been thinking, where he might go, who he might trust. He leaned forward slightly. Tell me about him. About your relationship. The request caught me off guard. Why would Dante Ricci care about my failed marriage? We met 5 years ago, I began hesitantly. I was waitressing at a different restaurant then. Marco came in often, always left big tips. He was charming, attentive. Said he worked in international imports. And you believed him? I felt heat rise to my cheeks. I was 22 and naive. He wore nice suits, drove a nice car. He seemed legitimate. When did you realize he wasn't? I traced a pattern on the arm of my chair, remembering. Little things at first. Phone calls he'd taken another room. Meetings at odd hours. Cash, lots of it, that he couldn't explain. Then bigger things. A black eye he couldn't account for. A gun I found in his drawer. I shrugged. By then, I was pregnant with Sophia. And you stayed, Dante observed, no judgment in his tone. I stayed, I confirmed quietly. I thought I could change him, that becoming a father would settle him. I was wrong. When did he leave? 3 months ago. I came home from a late shift and found a note. He said he'd met someone else, that he never wanted the responsibility of a family. The pain had dulled with time, replaced by anger and eventually resignation. He cleared out our bank account, left me with nothing but debt and apologies. Dante's jaw tightened, a flash of something like disgust crossing his features. A man who abandons his child has no honor, he said, the words carrying the weight of an old-world condemnation. Marco never had much honor to begin with, I said bitterly. Did he mention any places he particularly loved? Somewhere he might feel safe, I thought for a moment. He talked about Lake Geneva sometimes. Said he wanted to buy a cabin there eventually. And he had a cousin in Milwaukee he was close to. Dante nodded, making a note on a pad in front of him. Anyone else he might turn to? Former colleagues? Friends? There was a man named Emil he mentioned occasionally. I never met him, but they spoke on the phone often. Dante's pen stilled. Emil Kostic. I don't remember his last name, I said, surprised by Dante's reaction. Why? Do you know him? He works for Vaziri, Dante said, his expression darkening. If Marco was in contact with Kostic, it suggests the theft may have been planned from within Vaziri's organization. So Marco was working for Vaziri, not you? I asked, trying to understand the complex web of allegiances. A ghost of a smile touched Dante's lips. Chicago's criminal enterprises are complicated. Territory and loyalty shift. Marco moved between organizations when it suited him. His eyes met mine, which is why neither side fully trusted him. Before I could respond, a knock came at the door, and Rosa entered. Mr. Ricci, Antonio has arrived with the child and Mrs. Petrova. My heart leapt. Sophia's here? I was already on my feet. Dante stood as well, straightening his sweater in a surprisingly human gesture. Have Antonio bring them to the garden terrace, he instructed Rosa. We'll join them there. As Rosa left, Dante turned to me. Your daughter doesn't need to know the complications of our situation. As far as she's concerned, you're both guests here because your apartment is being repaired after a water leak. I nodded, grateful for the simple explanation that would spare Sophia any fear. Thank you. He moved around the desk, suddenly close enough that I could smell his cologne, that same mix of sandalwood and something darker that I'd noticed the night before. There is one more thing, he said, his voice dropping slightly. While you're here, you will be introduced to others as my personal guest. It provides an additional layer of protection." "What does that mean exactly?" I asked, suddenly aware of how much taller he was, how his presence seemed to fill the space around me. Those amber eyes held mine for a beat too long. "It means no one will dare touch what belongs to me." A shiver ran down my spine. Fear mixed with something else I didn't want to examine. "I don't belong to you," I said quietly but firmly. "No," he agreed, that almost smile appearing again. "But they don't need to know that." He gestured toward the door, a clear dismissal of the subject. "Shall we? Your daughter is waiting." The garden terrace was a marvel of landscaping and architecture, a spacious stone patio surrounded by meticulously maintained flower beds, with the lake glittering beyond. But I had eyes only for the small figure clutching Mrs. Petrova's hand. "Mommy!" Sophia cried, breaking free and running toward me with her dark curls bouncing. I knelt and caught her in my arms, breathing in her familiar scent of baby shampoo and the slight sweetness that was uniquely hers. "Hi, baby," I whispered, holding her tight. "I missed you. Mrs. Petrova said we're having an adventure," she informed me seriously, pulling back to look at my face. "Our house got a big boo-boo from water." "That's right," I said, smoothing her hair. "We're going to stay here for a little while until it's fixed." Sophia's attention shifted over my shoulder, her eyes widening. I turned to find Dante standing a few paces behind us, watching our reunion with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Who's that?" Sophia stage whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. I stood, keeping her hand in mine. "This is Mr. Ricci. This is his house where we're staying." Dante approached slowly, then, to my surprise, crouched down to Sophia's level. "Hello, Sophia," he said. His usual commanding tone softened considerably. "Welcome to my home." My daughter, never shy, stepped forward with the confidence of a child who had never been given reason to fear adults. "Your house is big," she declared. "Do you have toys?" A genuine smile spread across Dante's face, the first I'd seen, transforming his features from intimidating to almost boyishly handsome. "As a matter of fact, I do," he said. "Would you like to see them?" Sophia nodded eagerly. Dante stood and exchanged a glance with Rosa, who nodded and approached. "Rosa will show you a special room we've prepared," he told Sophia. "Your mother and I need to speak with Mrs. Petrova for a moment, and then we'll join you." Sophia went willingly with Rosa, chattering about her favorite toys and colors as they disappeared into the house. "She's a beautiful child, Mrs. Petrova said, watching them go. "So much like you at that age." I turned to my elderly neighbor, suddenly struck by the strangeness of seeing her in this setting, her worn cardigan and practical shoes incongruous against the luxury of Dante's estate. "Thank you for watching her, Mrs. Petrova," I said, giving her a quick hug. "I'm sorry about the sudden arrangement." "Nonsense," she said, patting my cheek. "Children are resilient." She was no trouble. Dante, who had been observing our interaction with interest, stepped forward. "Mrs. Petrova, my driver will take you home now. I want to thank you for your help." He extended an envelope to her, which she accepted with a slight widening of her eyes at whatever sum it contained. "That's very generous, Mr. Ricci." "Your discretion is appreciated," he replied. "If anyone asks about Arya and Sophia, the story about the water damage stands." Mrs. Petrova nodded, her shrewd eyes moving between Dante and me. Whatever conclusion she drew, she kept to herself. "Of course. May I say goodbye to the little one before I go?" "I'll have Rosa bring her out," Dante said, making a gesture to Antonio, who stood nearby. After Mrs. Petrova had kissed Sophia goodbye and departed, I found myself alone with Dante on the terrace, watching Antonio's car disappear down the long drive. "You've prepared a room for her?" I asked, turning to face him. Dante nodded. "With toys, books, and anything else a 3-year-old might need. Rosa has grandchildren. She advised on the preparations." The thoughtfulness of the gesture surprised me. "Thank you." He inclined his head slightly, those amber eyes studying me. "Your daughter has your eyes," he observed. "And your spirit. She's braver than I am," I admitted with a small smile. "I wouldn't say that," he replied quietly. It took considerable courage to slip me that note last night. Before I could respond, Sophia's voice called from inside. "Mommy, come see. There's a dollhouse bigger than me." Dante gestured toward the house, that unexpected smile returning briefly. "After you, Aria Costello. It seems we're being summoned." Block 4. The days settled into an unexpected routine. Mornings began with breakfast in the sunlit kitchen, Sophia chattering away while Rosa prepared elaborate meals that my daughter actually ate without complaint, a miracle in itself. Afternoons found us exploring the vast grounds, or playing in the princess room, as Sophia had dubbed her lavishly appointed bedroom with its canopy bed and life-sized dollhouse. Dante himself was an elusive presence, appearing for brief moments before vanishing for hours, or sometimes days on business I didn't ask about. When he was present, I noticed how his demeanor softened around Sophia, how his usual vigilant stillness gave way to something almost gentle when she showed him her latest drawing, or demanded he read her a story. It was during one such evening, a week into our stay, that I realized how quickly we were adapting to this strange new life. I stood in the doorway of the library, watching as Dante sat in a leather armchair with Sophia on his lap, reading The Little Prince with all the voices. My daughter was enraptured, her small hand occasionally reaching up to touch his jaw when she wanted to ask a question, completely unafraid of the man who made hardened criminals tremble. "Again, Mr. Dante," she demanded when he finished, using the name she'd created for him despite Rosa's attempts to teach her proper address. "It's getting late, Piccola," he said, the Italian endearment slipping out naturally. "Your mother will want you in bed soon." Sophia turned those pleading eyes, my eyes, toward me. "Please, Mommy, one more story." I smiled despite myself. One more, then bath and bed. Dante raised an eyebrow at me, amusement playing at the corners of his mouth. "You're the boss," he told Sophia, who giggled delightedly. I left them to their story and wandered onto the terrace, wrapping my arms around myself in the cool evening air. The sight of them together stirred something uncomfortable in my chest. A warmth I didn't want to acknowledge, a sense of rightness that had no place in this temporary sanctuary. Because it was temporary, I had to remember that. This wasn't our life. Dante Ricci wasn't part of our family, regardless of how skillfully he read bedtime stories, or how Sophia's face lit up when he entered a room. He was a dangerous man who had temporarily aligned his interests with our safety, nothing more. "She's asleep." His voice came from behind me sometime later, startling me from my thoughts. "Rosa is with her." I turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, silhouetted by the warm light from inside. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up the sleeves of his shirt, exposing strong forearms. The casual dishevelment made him look more approachable, almost ordinary, if one could ignore the watchful intensity of his gaze. "Thank you for the story," I said. "She's become quite attached to you." Something flickered across his face. Pleasure, perhaps, or satisfaction. "Children are good judges of character," he said, moving to join me at the stone balustrade overlooking the lake. I couldn't help the small snort that escaped me. "I'm not sure many people in Chicago would agree with that assessment of your character." Rather than take offense, he chuckled, a low, rich sound I'd rarely heard from him. "Perhaps not, but I'd argue they've never seen the real me." "And who is that?" I asked, genuinely curious. "The real Dante Ricci?" He was silent for a long moment, looking out over the water. "A man of contradictions," he finally said. "Like everyone else." "Most everyone else doesn't run criminal empires," I pointed out. His mouth quirked up at one corner. "My family has been in business in Chicago for 3 generations, Aria. The lines between legitimate and illegitimate blurred long ago." "Is that how you justify it?" I asked, then immediately regretted my boldness. But Dante didn't seem angry. He turned to face me, leaning one hip against the stone railing. "I don't seek justification. I inherited certain responsibilities. I fulfill them according to a code. A code that allows for violence, for fear, when necessary," he acknowledged without shame, "but also for protection, for loyalty, for keeping one's word." His eyes held mine steadily. "Have I given you reason to fear me, Aria?" I thought about it honestly. "No," I admitted, "but that doesn't mean I shouldn't." He took a step closer, and I found myself unable to move away. Smart woman, he murmured, his accent thickening slightly, cautious, but perhaps not cautious enough. What does that mean? It means you're beginning to trust me, he said, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers barely grazing my skin. That could be dangerous. My breath caught at the contact. For whom? His eyes darkened, and for a moment, I thought he might close the remaining distance between us. Instead, he stepped back, his expression returning to its usual controlled mask. We've had a development regarding your ex-husband, he said, the abrupt change of subject leaving me oddly disappointed. One of my contacts spotted him in Milwaukee, at his cousin's house, as you suggested. I straightened, suddenly alert. Did you catch him? He was gone by the time my men arrived, but they found something interesting. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, holding it out to me on his palm. It was a child's bracelet, a simple string of colorful beads with a small silver heart charm. Sophia's, I breathed, recognizing it immediately. She lost it about a month before Marco left. We looked everywhere. I glanced up, confused. Why would Marco have this? Dante closed his fingers around the bracelet. That's what I've been asking myself. It seems an odd item for a man to take when abandoning his family. Maybe he grabbed it by mistake, or... I frowned, thinking. Sophia was always taking it off, leaving it places. Maybe it got mixed in with his things. Perhaps, Dante conceded, though he didn't sound convinced. There's something else. Marco's cousin claimed he was asking about you and Sophia, wanted to know if you'd moved, changed your routine. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the evening air. Why would he care? He walked away from us. That's the question, isn't it? Dante pocketed the bracelet. I think there's more to Marco's story than either of us know. Do you think he'll try to find us? I think he already is, Dante said gravely. Which is why you need to stay here, where I can ensure your safety. I nodded, suddenly grateful for the solid walls and security systems of Dante's fortress. What about the diamonds? Any sign of those? Not yet, but if Marco had them, they'd be worth enough to keep him hidden for years. He paused, studying my face. Unless he had a reason to come out of hiding, like what? Like something more valuable than diamonds. His gaze was penetrating, or someone. The implication hung in the air between us. I shook my head in disbelief. Marco doesn't care about us. He made that very clear when he left. Men lie, Arya, Dante said softly, especially to themselves. Before I could respond, Antonio appeared at the terrace door. Boss, he said, with a nod of acknowledgement to me, they're ready for you. Dante straightened, instantly shifting back into the role of capo. We'll continue this conversation later, he told me. Don't wait up. I watched him go, conflicting emotions swirling in my chest. The idea that Marco might be looking for us, for Sophia, added a new layer of fear to an already complicated situation. But beneath that fear lurked something else. A growing awareness of Dante that I was finding increasingly difficult to ignore. The night passed restlessly, filled with dreams of Marco's return, of diamonds spilling like water through my fingers, of amber eyes watching me from the shadows. I woke before dawn, giving up on sleep and padding quietly to the kitchen for coffee. To my surprise, Rosa was already there, kneading dough on the marble counter with practiced movements. You're up early, she observed without looking up. Couldn't sleep, I admitted, heading for the coffee machine. Sit, she ordered. I'll make you a proper coffee. I obeyed, watching as she moved efficiently around the kitchen. There was something comforting about Rosa's presence, her no-nonsense manner, her quiet competence. Over the past week, I'd come to see her as more than just Dante's housekeeper. She was the heart of this strange household, keeping everything running with invisible precision. You've known him a long time, I said as she placed an espresso in front of me. It wasn't a question. Rosa wiped her hands on her apron, giving me a measuring look. I came to work for the Ricci family when Dante was 10 years old, she said, after his mother died. What was he like? I asked. Unable to imagine Dante as a child, a small smile softened her stern features. Serious. Too serious for a boy his age, always trying to please his father. She resumed her kneading. Enrico Ricci was a hard man, brilliant in business but cold as a father. He saw Dante as his heir, not his son. "That sounds lonely," I said, thinking of Sophia, and how openly she expressed her love, how freely she gave her affection. "It was," Rosa agreed, "until Valentina." "Valentina?" Rosa's hands stilled on the dough. "His wife." The word hit me like a physical blow. "Dante is married?" I asked, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Was," Rosa corrected, something like sorrow passing over her face. "Valentina died 5 years ago. Cancer." I sat back, absorbing this new information. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." "He doesn't speak of her," Rosa said, dividing the dough into rounds. "But she changed him, made him softer, happier. When she died..." She shook her head. The darkness came back. I thought of the Dante I'd glimpsed reading to Sophia, the unexpected gentleness in his hands as he tucked her into bed. "Not completely," I murmured. Rosa gave me a sharp look. "No," she agreed after a moment. "Not completely." We fell silent as she continued her baking. I sipped my coffee, thinking about the layers of Dante Ricci that were slowly being revealed to me. The ruthless businessman, the generous protector, the grieving widower. Each new discovery made him more complex, more human, and somehow more dangerous to my peace of mind. "Rosa," I said finally, "why is he helping us? Really?" The older woman dusted flour from her hands and met my gaze directly. "That, cara mia, is a question only he can answer." Before I could press further, the sound of running feet echoed down the hallway, and Sophia burst into the kitchen in her pajamas, hair wild from sleep. "Mommy! Rosa! Is it morning? Can I help make breakfast?" she asked in a breathless rush. The serious conversation dissolved as Rosa smiled and lifted my daughter onto a stool, showing her how to shape the dough into small rolls. I watched them together, struck by how quickly Sophia had adapted to this new environment, how easily she'd accepted these strangers into her life. "Children are resilient," Mrs. Petrova had said, "but they're also vulnerable, forming attachments without understanding the temporary nature of situations like ours." When this was over, when Marco was found, and the threat from Vaziri eliminated, how would I explain to Sophia that we had to leave this place, these people who had become so important to her? How would I explain it to myself? Later that morning, as Sophia and I were playing in the garden, Antonio approached with a phone in hand. "Miss Costello," he said formally, "Mr. Ricci would like to speak with you." I took the phone, my heart inexplicably speeding up. "Dante?" "Arya." His voice was tense, all business. "We've found Marco." I gripped the phone tighter. "Where?" "A hotel on the north side. My men are watching him now." There was a pause. "He's not alone. He's with Emil Kostic. Vaziri's man," I remembered. "What does that mean?" "It means the situation is more complicated than we thought." I could hear voices in the background, the sound of a car engine. "I'm going to speak with him personally." Alarm shot through me. "Is that safe?" A low chuckle came through the line. "Your concern is touching, but unnecessary. I'll be well protected. What does he want? Why is he in Chicago? That's what I intend to find out." His voice softened slightly. "Stay with Sophia. Don't leave the estate for any reason. I'll call when it's done." The line went dead before I could respond. I handed the phone back to Antonio, my mind racing. "Is everything okay, Mommy?" Sophia asked, tugging at my hand. "You look worried." I forced a smile. "Everything's fine, baby. Just grown-up talk." But as I watched her return to her game, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening with Marco would change everything. Again, hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. I tried to focus on Sophia, on maintaining normalcy for her sake, but my mind kept circling back to Dante confronting Marco. What would happen? What would my ex-husband say about the diamonds? About us? And beneath those practical concerns lurked a deeper worry for Dante's safety that I wasn't ready to examine too closely. By evening, I was a bundle of nervous energy. After tucking Sophia in with promises that everything was fine, I paced the length of the terrace, watching the driveway for any sign of Dante's return. "He'll call when he can," Rosa said, appearing beside me with a glass of wine. "Drink. It will help with the waiting." I accepted the glass gratefully. "Has he told you anything?" She shook her head. "But I've been with the family long enough to know when to worry and when not to. This is not a time to worry." "How can you be sure?" Rosa's weathered hand covered mine briefly. "Because he has something to come back to now." Before I could ask what she meant, headlights swept up the driveway, and a familiar black Bentley appeared. I set down my untouched wine and moved toward the steps leading down from the terrace, Rosa tactfully retreating inside. Dante emerged from the car alone, his expression unreadable in the darkness. He looked up, finding me immediately, as if he'd known exactly where I would be waiting. Without a word, he climbed the stairs, stopping a few feet away. "Is Sophia asleep?" he asked, his voice revealing nothing. I nodded. "For about an hour now." "Good." He loosened his tie with one hand, a gesture I'd come to recognize as one of his few tells of tension. "We should talk." I followed him into his study, noticing the faint smell of cigarette smoke clinging to him, another sign of stress, as I'd never seen him smoke at the estate. He poured himself a measure of whiskey, offered me one which I declined, then leaned against his desk rather than sitting behind it. "I spoke with Marco," he said without preamble. My heart stuttered. "And?" "The diamonds were a cover story." Dante took a sip of his whiskey, watching me over the rim of the glass. "There were no diamonds. There never were." "I don't understand," I said, confusion replacing anxiety. "Then what did he steal from Vaziri?" "Information." Dante set down his glass. Marco worked as an accountant for several of Vaziri's legitimate businesses. He discovered evidence of money laundering, tax fraud, connections to terrorist financing, enough to put Vaziri away for decades. He copied files, took photographs of documents. Blackmail? I guessed. Dante shook his head. Insurance. Marco was planning to disappear, start a new life. The information was his protection, his way of ensuring Vaziri wouldn't come after him. Then why did he leave without it? Why risk coming back to Chicago? "Because he hid it," Dante said, his amber eyes fixed intently on my face. "And now he needs it back." A cold realization began to dawn. "Where did he hide it?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Dante reached into his pocket and pulled out Sophia's bracelet, letting it dangle from his fingers. The silver heart charm caught the light, winking innocently. "Not in the bracelet itself," he clarified, seeing my expression. "Inside the charm. It's a small data drive, disguised to look like a piece of children's jewelry." I sank into a chair, stunned. Marco used our daughter's bracelet to hide evidence against a crime lord? He put her in danger deliberately? "Yes," Dante said simply. "When he realized what he'd done, that he'd left the evidence behind when he ran, he tried to return for it. But by then, Sophia had lost the bracelet. And that's why Vaziri's men were watching us," I whispered. "They knew Marco would try to contact me. They knew he'd come back for the bracelet. Though they didn't know exactly what it was or where it was hidden, they hoped you would lead them to it." A horrible thought struck me. "Is that why you took us in? To use us as bait for Marco?" Something like hurt flashed across Dante's face. "No," he said firmly. "I took you in because you were in danger. You and an innocent child. That hasn't changed." "What has changed then?" I asked, sensing there was more he wasn't telling me. Dante's expression hardened. "Vaziri knows Marco is in Chicago. His men will be hunting him. And if they can't find him, they'll come for us," I finished, fear clutching at my throat. "What about Marco? Where is he now?" Dante's jaw tightened. "Under my protection, temporarily. He's willing to give me the evidence against Vaziri in exchange for safe passage out of the country." "Just like that? After putting his daughter in danger?" I stood, anger replacing fear. "He doesn't get to walk away again. Arya." "No. He used Sophia as a hiding place for stolen evidence. He made her a target, and now he wants to disappear while we live with the consequences." Dante moved closer, his hands coming to rest on my shoulders. "Listen to me. Marco will face consequences, just not the ones you're imagining. The evidence he stole will dismantle Vaziri's entire operation. That kind of betrayal has its own price. I want to see him, I said suddenly. I want to look him in the eye when he explains why he put his own daughter in danger. Dante studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Tomorrow. I'll arrange it. And after? I asked. After Marco gives you the evidence and Vaziri is dealt with, what happens to us? His hands tightened fractionally on my shoulders. What do you want to happen? The question caught me off guard. I hadn't allowed myself to think beyond survival, beyond the immediate danger. What did I want? To return to my tiny apartment, to exhausting double shifts, to the constant struggle of making ends meet? Or, I want Sophia to be safe, I said finally. I want her to have stability, security. And what about you, Arya? Dante asked, his voice dropping lower. What do you want for yourself? I looked up at him, at this complicated, dangerous man who had upended my life and somehow, improbably, become essential to it. I want to stop being afraid, I whispered. Something shifted in his expression. A softening, a decision made. Slowly, deliberately, he raised one hand to cup my cheek. I can give you that, he said, his thumb brushing across my skin, if you'll let me. My heart hammered against my ribs as he leaned closer, his intention clear. I had every reason to pull away, to remember who he was, what he was. Instead, I found myself rising to meet him, my body making a decision my mind was still debating. His lips met mine with unexpected gentleness, a question rather than a demand. I answered by sliding my hands up to his shoulders, drawing him closer. The kiss deepened, his arms encircling me completely, strong and secure. For the first time in years, perhaps for the first time ever, I felt truly safe. When we finally broke apart, his amber eyes were darker, heated. I've wanted to do that since you slipped me that note, he admitted, his accent thicker than usual. A small laugh escaped me, even when I was terrified and looked like I'd been on my feet for 12 hours. Especially then, he said seriously. Your courage, your determination to protect your child, it was... He seemed to search for the right word. Magnificent. Before I could respond, a soft knock interrupted us. Antonio stood in the doorway, his expression grave. Sorry, boss. We've got a situation. Dante's demeanor changed instantly, his body tensing. What is it? Emil Kostic. He's gone, and so is Marco. Dante cursed in Italian, moving away from me. How? They slipped the surveillance during the shift change. We're checking traffic cameras now. Lock down the estate, Dante ordered. Double the guards. No one gets in or out without my direct approval. Antonio nodded and disappeared. Dante turned back to me, all traces of the tender moment gone, replaced by the calculating strategist. If Marco has betrayed me to Vaziri... He wouldn't, I said, though I had no reason to defend my ex-husband. Not if it meant putting Sophia at risk again. Men do desperate things when cornered, Dante replied grimly. Stay with Sophia tonight. Don't open the door for anyone except me or Rosa. I nodded, new fear washing over me. What are you going to do? Find Marco before Vaziri does. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face in a gesture that seemed almost absent-minded. We'll finish our conversation later. I caught his hand as he began to turn away. Dante, I said softly. Be careful. His expression softened momentarily. Always, cara mia. I spent the night curled around Sophia in her canopy bed, listening to the sound of security teams patrolling the grounds. My daughter slept peacefully, unaware of the danger circling us once again. I envied her innocence, her absolute trust that the adults in her life would keep her safe. Dawn was breaking when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Meet me at the boathouse. Come alone. Don't tell Ricci. For Sophia's sake. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Marco. Here, on the estate. How had he gotten past security? Reason told me to call Dante immediately. But something, maternal instinct perhaps, made me hesitate. If Marco truly had information that would keep Sophia safe, I needed to hear it. And if he had betrayed us to Vaziri, I needed to know that too. Carefully, I slipped out of bed, tucking the covers around Sophia. I scribbled a quick note to Rosa saying I'd gone for an early walk and left it on the nightstand. Then, pulling on a sweater against the morning chill, I made my way downstairs and out toward the lake. The boathouse was a small structure at the end of a private dock housing Dante's collection of watercraft. As I approached, I saw no signs of security. They must have been focused on the main house and perimeter. The door was ajar, creaking slightly in the breeze off the lake. "Marco," I called softly, pushing the door wider. A figure emerged from the shadows, thinner than I remembered, with new lines etched around his eyes, but unmistakably my ex-husband. "Aria," he said, his voice hoarse. "You came." "For Sophia," I clarified coldly. "What are you doing here? How did you get onto the estate?" He gave a hollow laugh. "I worked for Vaziri for years. Breaking and entering is a basic skill." His eyes darted nervously toward the door. "We don't have much time. Ricci's men will realize I'm here soon." "What do you want, Marco? Why risk coming here?" "To warn you." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Ricci isn't what you think. He's using you, using Sophia to get to me." I shook my head, unconvinced. "He's protected us from Vaziri's men, from the mess you created. It's all connected," Marco hissed. "The evidence I took implicates Ricci too. They're partners, Aria. Vaziri and Ricci. The rivalry is a front to distract the authorities." "I don't believe you," I said, though uncertainty crept into my voice. "Why would Dante protect us if he was working with Vaziri? Because I hid the evidence where only you could find it." Marco reached into his pocket and pulled out what looked like a small silver key. "This opens the heart charm on Sophia's bracelet. Inside is a data chip with everything. Records, photographs, account numbers. It proves they're working together." I stared at the key, my mind racing. "If what you're saying is true, we're in danger here. Extreme danger," Marco confirmed. "Once Ricci gets what he wants, he has no reason to keep you alive. Either of you." "Then why come to me instead of going to the police?" "Because I need your help to get the evidence to the right people." He pressed the key into my palm. "There's a federal prosecutor named Catalano. She's been building a case against Ricci and Vaziri for years. Get the data to her, and she'll protect you both." The sound of voices outside made us both freeze. Marco's face paled. "They're coming. I have to go." He gripped my shoulders, his eyes desperate. "Promise me you'll get Sophia out of here. Promise me you'll take the evidence to Catalano." Before I could respond, the boathouse door burst open. Dante stood framed in the doorway, flanked by Antonio and another security guard, all three with guns drawn. "Step away from her, Marco," Dante said, his voice deadly calm. Marco's hands dropped from my shoulders as he backed away. "Ricci," he said, a tremor in his voice. "This isn't what it looks like." "No?" Dante's eyes flickered to me, then back to Marco. "It looks like a man who's betrayed everyone who ever trusted him, trying to do it again." "I was just explaining to Aria why I had to leave," Marco said quickly. "About the trouble I was in. That's all." Dante's cold gaze shifted to me. "And what did he tell you, Aria?" I clutched the small silver key in my palm, Marco's warnings echoing in my mind. If he was telling the truth, Sophia and I were in immediate danger. If he was lying, "That he was sorry," I said, the half-truth bitter on my tongue, "that he never meant for Sophia to be involved." Something in Dante's expression suggested he didn't fully believe me, but he nodded slightly. "A bit late for apologies, wouldn't you say?" "Dante," I began, not sure what I was going to say, only knowing I needed to defuse the situation. "He's Sophia's father. Whatever else he's done is precisely why he doesn't deserve your protection," Dante finished, his eyes hardening. "Marco Costello used his own child as a hiding place for stolen evidence. He abandoned you both without a second thought. And now he's working with Emil Kostic, Vaziri's right hand." "That's not true," Marco protested. "Kostic promised to help me get out of the country. That's all." Dante's laugh was cold. "And you believed him? Kostic doesn't help anyone but Vaziri." He gestured to his men. "Take him to the house. Keep him secure until I decide what to do with him." As Antonio and the guard moved toward Marco, my ex-husband made a desperate lunge toward me. "Aria, don't trust him. Remember what I said." Antonio intercepted him easily, twisting his arm behind his back. Marco's eyes found mine one last time, pleading, before he was dragged from the boathouse, leaving me alone with Dante. "What did he really tell you?" Dante asked quietly, holstering his weapon. I looked up at him, at the man who had protected us, who had shown my daughter kindness, who had kissed me with such tenderness just hours ago. The man Marco claimed was using us, who would discard us when we were no longer useful. In that moment, I made my choice. I opened my palm, revealing the small silver key. "He gave me this," I said. "For Sophia's bracelet. He said there's evidence inside the charm, evidence against Viziri." Dante took the key, examining it. "And against me?" he asked, his gaze sharp. "Did he claim I was involved as well?" I nodded, unable to lie. "He said you and Viziri were partners, that the rivalry was a front." A muscle ticked in Dante's jaw. "And you believed him?" "I don't know what to believe anymore," I admitted, wrapping my arms around myself. A week ago, my biggest concern was making rent. Now I'm in the middle of a war between crime families, and my daughter's father is trying to convince me her protector is actually her enemy. Dante stepped closer, tucking the key into his pocket. "There's a simple way to resolve this, Arya. When we open the charm, we'll see exactly what evidence Marco has. If it implicates me alongside Viziri, you'll have your answer. And if it does?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What then?" His amber eyes held mine steadily. "Then you'll take Sophia and go wherever you want. I'll ensure you have the resources to disappear completely, new identities, new lives. You'll never have to see me again, and if it doesn't, if Marco was lying,